I am so honored to be here. It's nice to take a break from the craziness of the markets. I don't know if anyone saw Oracle's numbers last night. So this was a nice day to step back and talk sort of big picture. And I love how Matt set it up. There's the technology and innovation, there's change management and leadership. And those are the areas that I try to connect on a daily basis at CNBC, right? It's not enough to just talk about AI for Wall Street because many companies, they're not technology companies first, but now everyone's a technology company. So tying those threads together, great. And Arvind, I've had the pleasure of knowing for a few years now. And I think maybe was that your first CNBC interview?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, perfect. And you're just so good. I mean, I go back to Arvind all the time because you're so good at zooming out and talking about why certain trends, certain innovation, why AI actually matters. So, a project I've started over the last few years are these sort of deep dives into what distillation means or what the app layer versus the foundation layer means. And Arvind is someone who I tap consistently to just get my head around these really difficult topics. Bob and Paul, it's great. I met you guys this morning, but I can already tell they have a great dynamic. So I told them to not wait for me, interrupt each other, fight a little, but they've assured me they agree on everything.
Absolutely everything.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, so let's start because we're at the end of this year, and it's been a pretty remarkable year. I was reporting, just a few weeks ago about the 3rd anniversary of ChatGPT, which changed everything. Not for you guys necessarily, but for maybe myself and some others in the audience that didn't understand really how AI was in practice. And we've just had so much change since then. And, if the first year was sort of all about the innovation and the novelty of it, it seems like year 2 was a little of that, and year 3 has been sort of where the rubber hits the road a little bit, especially in markets. Investors are asking, where's the ROI? Don't know how many times I've reported on that kind of story. So watching this unfold, that's been my view, but I'm curious, what do you think has changed the most this year? And maybe not just this year, but in the last 3 years. Arvind, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I think experimentation is still, by the way, alive, as much as it was the last 2 years. So while now we leaders are demanding results, and actually they are seeing results, I would say 90% of the effort in AI still is about experimenting and learning what's the art of the possible. So that, and I think it will continue. So and that's not a problem. That's the first thing I want to start with. I think it is important. This is a foundational technology, and it is important for us to keep that experimentation going over the next few years. But I think the big change this year was real business value that has been added. I think nobody would be surprised that with certain business functions like customer support and software engineering, we've fundamentally changed already how these functions work, how people actually spend their time today. There is I don't know of any developer today who's not actually fundamentally using AI to get most of the lines of code written. So there's real impact, in terms of there's real impact, in some functions, in engineering, I would say there's real impact in how it has redefined, how you work. Mm-hmm. It has actually allowed you to build things that you couldn't do before. How is that translated into business value for your company? That is still we're early. It takes time. When that sort of when you innovate something, when you create something, for it to sort of start to actually materialize in real revenue. So that may take a little bit more time there. But then when you look at customer support, there are clear metrics there. Companies have reduced their cost of supporting customers anywhere from 20 to 50%. As they've sort of actively embraced AI. So we're seeing, real impact, and AI there's no doubt in people's mind anymore that, hey, are we still experimenting? They are getting real business value.
And maybe that experimentation side you see continuing into next year.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, actually, that's critical.
Right.
Because I think, we have not explored more than 1% of what this technology is capable of doing.
And so, Paul, Arvind mentioned, software engineering, customer service. Those are the 2 areas that we've seen change most by AI. But, some of the companies, CEOs that I talked to want it to go beyond that and ask, when are we going to start to see it change marketing and sales in a significant way? And the answer there isn't quite as clear. How do you see it. And what do you think is the biggest change that we've seen this year?
Yeah, so I'd build on what Arvind said in terms of experimentation, that figuring out how to use these kinds of tools in the context of our work is absolutely essential. And I think many of the employees in the organizations that I work with are looking for an instruction manual still. And they're used to using applications like Microsoft Excel, and that you could take 100 LinkedIn courses to figure out exactly how to create all your formulas. AI doesn't come with an instruction manual in the same way. And in fact, the use cases are not pre-described. So that experimentation amongst users in our companies is so important to figuring that out. And I think when we talk about other functions like HR and sales, as you mentioned, those are places where these tools fit into the workflow is not quite as obvious as in software engineering, for example. That doesn't mean there aren't important use cases. It just puts the onus on more of our employees to be taking the initiative to figure out where and how can these tools be useful. So we're seeing more of that happening. So that's one trend. Another one that I've seen, especially this year, is the move from thinking about individual uses of AI and Gen AI in particular to more team-based uses. So a lot of CEOs that I've been working with are really pushing from, well, it's great that you're summarizing your emails more effectively, but what we really want to see is how can we get more coordination at the team level or the organizational level to change core workflows and business processes and those kinds of activities. And so I think we're starting to see transformation in those areas, and we can talk about some of those later, but we're at least seeing more of an awareness that we need to be moving beyond people just doing individual explorations and more like, how do we create dynamics where we're all using these tools to really change the way that we're working, find efficiencies, and create innovation?
So Bob, let me ask you the same question sort of a different way, because all these things we're talking about, it's still sort of the promise, right? Is that it's not just individuals, but it's teams, and that it's going to be entrenched in these different organizations. And maybe if we started 2025, everyone's been very excited about AI. Should we be further along than we are right now? Should we have more to show for this year?
I like that question, and it annoys me. There's so much impatience.
Yes.
Which impatience is a beautiful thing and a terrible thing. So the impatience, and I come back to the experimentation that we all know, and we can cite all the academic studies and everything, that when you come up with something new, even just reorganizing your company, but let alone introducing a new technology. Paul studied digital transformation extensively. Most of them fail. Yeah. Most of them take longer than they expect. And that is when it's working right. Because otherwise they're not even doing anything.
It's not a quick fix.
Well, inaction is a way to avoid failure. So this is one of the things that bothers me now. The other side of the impatience that we're seeing, and let's see the great flattening, all of the organizations that are removing levels and everything. I'm all for removing as many levels as you can, but if you remove levels, and by removing levels, somebody maybe had 8 direct reports and now has 30. Right. And this is happening in a lot of companies I know. And they don't have the structure, they don't have the tools to actually do it. That's the impatience to have a fantasy that AI is going to make it so that leaders can deal with 30 direct reports when they can't. So I like the impatience, but a little more patience with understanding most ideas are going to fail and learning along the way. Don't get upset when it fails. That means that you're doing something right.
I was at a dinner the other night, and one of the CEOs that was there said, it's not the year of the agent, it's the decade of the agent. So to your point.
Perfect.
But in a room full of journalists, we were like, can you be a little more specific? Like, what year are we in exactly? Okay, but something you just said there, Bob, you see that layers are growing, and it feels to me, though, that we're in a moment when the opposite is happening, at least in technology.
No, I didn't say they're growing. They're delayering.
They're delayering.
The great delayering, where a lot of the Silicon Valley companies are all imitating each other, and they're firing middle managers, and they're delayering. And what you end up with, and we in our AI report that Rebecca Hines and I just did for Glean, there's all this evidence actually still that when somebody has more than 10 direct reports, they cause bottlenecks, they get exhausted. And they do their jobs badly. So it'd be great if AI could support them, but it can't yet.
It can't yet. Let's get to that point. And Arvind, I wonder what you're seeing as well. When you have at least I remember we talked about this like a year ago, is that the AI sort of ROI was being seen in the margins and not necessarily boosting revenue, right? And that was kind of, to get that to that next level, that's what Wall Street really wants to see from the companies, non-AI companies, non-tech companies too, how AI is actually helping support new areas of growth. Is that easier to do with these smaller teams? Like, respond to what Bob said, in that may actually not lead to better productivity necessarily, because AI is not quite there yet. Did I characterize that okay?
Yeah, but also the one thing that we're agreeing on is that smaller teams are better, because
blanket better,
as long as you can coordinate them all together.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think AI actually is actually quite ready, in my opinion, to significantly add value and change like how teams actually are organized and function. But it's also like, I think people need to get some training on it before they can effectively use it. So like the strategy of like, first time getting rid of, teams, and suddenly like, now a manager has 30 reports, that's not going to actually be super helpful. Like, you have to actually bring AI into your day-to-day work processes. For example, like, have you actually built agents that can summarize, synthesize, and create very nice sort of reports for like what each one of your team members is working on, that you can actually consume much quicker, like as opposed to like having to go and talk to them and spend like 30 times 1 hour to understand what the team is working on. So you have to sort of like do these things in parallel. But I think people are fundamentally changing their ways of working. And I think AI is actually allowing us to actually have significant productivity. Like for me, for example, I'll give you one example, of my own, like as a CEO, like, I have, like tons of questions. Like I'm also, like curious by nature. And before, like, whenever I had like, these questions about our business, I would actually go and ask one of my, executive team members. And I was, and I wouldn't realize that I'm actually, creating, what was a harm, in my opinion, like just a casual question is creating like 30 hours of work, like downstream. I didn't really realize
they
that.
wanted to get you to cover all their bases.
And so, but then I started to realize it, and actually would actually ask fewer questions. But now, like I've changed that, because now I actually get to ask AI these questions, and AI can actually parse through all the information, the data, the knowledge, the context inside the company, and actually give me those answers or initial sort of starting points, which, so like that's my new way of working. If I like, let's say I have a question about, hey, should we partner with this particular company, or should we integrate this technology into our product? I don't actually go and ask my CTO that question first. I actually ask AI, and AI gives me a nice, good, concise answer, and then actually share that answer with the CTO, because I'm not fully trusting it yet. But that's the way, like, I think I'm changing their work from like 10 hours to maybe 5 minutes. Right. And so if you learn how to use it, it can do a lot for you.
And to be clear, I think this is a really important distinction. You're asking the Glean engine. You're not asking these questions of ChatGPT. You're asking the Glean product that knows everything about your organization.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think that's a key distinction. Yeah. Paul, what are you seeing in terms of companies that are using it well, and those that aren't? Give me some examples as well.
Yeah. So the top circle that we showed before was the leadership circle. And so I think that's a good place to start. So the companies that I'm seeing that are using it really well are doing a couple of things. One is that senior leaders are reminding everyone that AI is not a miracle drug, that it's a tool and it serves a purpose. And I think everyone in the room would agree with that, right? Like, we don't use AI to scramble our eggs in the morning, at least not yet, because it does certain things well and not other things.
How to scramble your eggs.
Right, maybe you could ask, right? Yeah, what's the right temperature to heat the pan or something? But making sure that if you're giving the directive, like, we want to be an AI first organization, that means finding the right places in our work where AI actually makes sense, and not coming up with, vanity metrics of like, well, how many queries are people running, and, how many tokens are we using, et cetera, because that's really incentivizing people to be using AI in use cases where it probably isn't the most important. So that's one. Second is, how do we think about encouraging experimentation and pushing it down low in our organizations too? I sort of think of myself when I'm working as a researcher, as a teacher, as a consultant, as someone who's on the front lines with workers in most of our organizations. And what I realized after 20 plus years of doing this kind of work is that most of the best ideas for how to get improvement in process, or oftentimes even in top line growth, come from our employees who are doing like the everyday work. And if we can get them feeling comfortable of experimenting with these tools and figuring out where they work and how to use them and where they can create productivities, we can tap a tremendous source of value there. But that actually runs counter to a lot of the way that the cultures in our organizations run, which is that we don't encourage people to take risks with the tools at the lower levels. And we're not telling them, look, these are general purpose tools that you need to figure out how to use and figure out where they can go and where they work. I'll give you a real quick example because you asked for a concrete one. This is one that I love. I mean, it's in a very low-tech sort of setting. So I did some work with a PR agency. And PR agencies are all about trying to get you your earned media coverage, right? So you've got account executives, and those account executives are always trying to write pitches and press releases to get your attention, right, Deirdre? So that you'll do a story, right, do a feature. And it's a lot of work to try to figure out how do we pitch this product or this company in the right way. And what the leaders of this organization realized was this is a repetitive task that we have a lot of great training data for. So we know we've been writing pitches and press releases and pitch emails for years. We know what kind of content works, what doesn't. It's also a great example of a place where there's a lot of unstructured data that could be really valuable. So you have the questions that you ask in an interview. You have what journalists write in a piece. And so we could mine that to figure out, does this person like to lead with a human interest story? Do they tend to ask these kinds of questions? That's really difficult to do. It's analytical, it's tough, and we can use AI to help us do that. So the combination of saying, like, look at the existing examples that we have. Look at the editors that we're trying to target. Can we create a match there? Really created a tremendous benefit for this organization. But even most importantly, they said, all right, well, if we're going to be freeing up people's time for doing that, what value add activities should they be doing instead? And they recognized we're not doing a great job with competitor analysis. We're not looking at how our competitor PR firms are pitching their customers and how could we create differentiation. So they were able to move a lot of the work that the account executives were doing to do that, which then only made those pitches and press releases work better. So that's the positive flywheel that we want. And those ideas came out of the assistant account executives saying, I'm trying to read through all of these editorials and all of these articles that someone's written, and it takes so long. Couldn't I use AI for that?
That's so interesting. It's that personalization piece, and that's always what I tell PR people too. If you're not watching what I'm doing on TV or writing about, then why would I read your pitch if you don't already know where it can fit in? So that's really interesting. Bob, let me come to you then on the flip side of that. Can you give us an example of where maybe it backfired, why companies should be cautious, to play devil's advocate here?
Well, I actually really like Paul's example. I want to go back to what Arvind discussed and how he does his role, because I think it comes back to a core idea of if we're going to talk about backfiring or not. So by the way he's using it in his job, he understands he's treating himself as a trustee of others' time. And he's using the AI to reduce the burden on the people that he works with. So he understands his interdependencies. The other side of AI, since this is one thing that we keep finding over and over again, and our colleagues who study this, is AI basically magnifies everything. So if you've got a terrible set of processes, it makes it worse. And the other thing is it's so efficient to waste other people's time. I can send out so many more emails. I can bother you every day with emails, phone calls, and texts about the meeting I want you to go to that I don't want to go to, but I'm on vacation because I'm not answering the text or whatever. And so as long as you understand the work itself and your interdependencies with others, and I think that Arvind has the perfect example that he's using it to reduce the burden on not just himself, but also on his colleagues. So it's the interdependencies that I think that are really the sticking point for making AI work in organizations. And then it's the negative interdependencies. And there's also coordination example in the report that Rebecca and I did, the AI transformation report. There was a guy who said he has a rule that you can only have one AI note taker, because what you end up with is you have 3 or 4 note takers and you got to coordinate them. And he actually did a post today that he was at a meeting and there were 28 different AI note takers. So that's sort of some kind of tragedy of the commons. And so I would go back to this notion of understanding your interdependencies I love Arvind's example, treating yourself as a trustee of others' time. So you're using the tool to reduce the burden rather than to make things worse for other people, better for yourself.
Can I jump in
Please.
really quick?
Yeah.
So the 20 AI note takers thing, ridiculous, right? Yeah. But I get it. I've seen meetings like this too. One of the things that worries me, and this is particularly important for a company like Glean that does knowledge management, other companies that are thinking about this, is it's so effortless now to create all kinds of synthetic content that has no actual basis in reality, but it's a good approximation to it. And when you think about those note takers, right? A note taker that's read the notes from another note taker that's then producing a summary, which I've seen happen in a couple of meetings that I've been in. Now you have this kind of view of something that almost happened but never quite did.
Right.
And to the extent that that gets part of our organization's memory, and then we're trying to use that to learn, is a huge problem. And so if you think about extrapolating out, how do we develop some kind of governance around this? And how do we think about the right content management strategies? And how do we make sure we're not creating crap?
Because it's the same problem that happens with gossip in every organization too. So it's not like it's a new problem. It's just the machines are doing it for us.
Like you said, it just amplifies everything, right? It blows the problem up.
Another example I like, my brother has a 7th grader and he used ChatGPT to write his essay. And my brother goes, that's obviously ChatGPT. And he goes, okay, give me a second. Humanize chatbot. Runs it through there. But I mean, and what you guys are talking about is very real. I mean, I've gone down these rabbit holes. I'm sure we all have, where you're asking the end, you're like, hold on a second, I'm so far from my original point, and this just created so much work. And to me, it feels like if we're looking at the year ahead too, maybe that's only you could see how that may even escalate. I mean, some of the biggest frontier model builders they have to monetize, right? We come back, OpenAI is burning billions and billions of dollars. They want to engage you, right? In the same way that social media needed to engage you a decade ago. And I think the word you're looking for, Paul, is slop, right? You get slop at the end. How do you avoid that? And that's just a consumer level, but it's so much more important in the enterprise, right? What data you're going after and making sure that, your example about having the 20 chatbots isn't creating something that isn't genuine to what happened.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I would add one thing, to that, this concept of work slop. Actually, even at Glean, sometimes now I feel like, I ask people for their opinions and they actually generate a document with AI and send it to me. And I think the fear that I have is that how much of, it's okay to start with AI, but it's not okay to sort of, you have to be the editor of that material in some ways. And so there is definitely, that risk of, sort of the, us moving away from the point and sort of the quality of the work reducing. So there, I do think, that as we need to think about, what's the right way to use AI, and how much you use it for generation and production, how much you use it for, as a personal assistant, where, what you do with AI is your business, but I still get to talk to a human, when I'm talking to you.
One of the best ways I heard it put is you have to use AI for the middle. You have to start on your own and end on your own, but AI can be really useful in the middle. Okay, I felt exhausted just hearing about these 20 chatbots and thinking about how you start with that end product and how you go back to what actually happened in the media. Paul, you wrote a whole book on digital exhaustion. Yes, so I figure you're a good person to ask about this. I mean, you're in an organization, let's say you're at a lower level and you know what's happening. You're listening to this conversation. You're thinking, okay, I have to level up, but there's so many tools. What do I use? And regardless, the amount of chatbots that are out there, but even do you learn how to vibe code or AI first code? Where do you start? What advice do you give to sort of leaders who want their employees to experiment, as we've talked about? Where do you start and what do you sort of ignore?
Yeah, so one of the places that I really encourage leaders to be thinking about is how you're talking about AI in your organizations. And there are few tools in my lifetime, at least, that have been as hyped or perhaps overhyped as AI. And I actually believe a lot of the hype. So don't get me wrong, but it's in the public's consciousness and in our employees' consciousness in a way that almost no other enterprise kind of tool ever has been. Mm-hmm. And people are worried about it and concerned about it. And so when we keep going on this, mission to proselytize our organization to be AI first and talk about AI all the time, it's really wearing people out. Like I've got really great data that shows that people just feel frustrated and they start to sort of shut down and aren't as open-minded about it. I think a better strategy is to remind people that our job is to provide them with capabilities for doing their work. And AI, in whatever form it is, right, generative, analytical, whatever, right, is a tool that has capabilities for helping people do their work better. And the job, I think, of most of the people in this room is helping your company to figure out what are the tools we need to move in the direction that we need to move in. And so if we can help our employees understand that that's really the goal, that frames it quite differently and makes it feel like, okay, my job is to then figure out how to use these tools rather than kind of be afraid of them.
So I really like that. I also want to build on that. And this is also one of the challenges, just workers at every level that I know of, up to executive vice presidents, are all afraid that they're going to lose their jobs or have less interesting jobs. And I do think that a key leadership job role, since we have this here, is as a leader, your job is to try to drive the fear out of the organization and to talk explicitly and to tell people what you're not going to do. We are not going to do any layoffs or reorganizations for at least 6 months. Just the people I know, 6 months is like forever. Yeah. And we may do it 6 months from now.
Can companies say that? No?
Yes, they can say that, and they can. And an honorable leader can actually stick to it. Okay. Most of the organizations I know that are doing these unexpected, massive, and constant reorganizations, if you look at the amount of money they have in the bank, it's actually staggering. They could wait 6 months or 3 months or even 2 weeks in some cases.
And on my side, that's sort of, we say maybe AI is, a veil for being able to do.
But the idea about the ways to reduce fear in large social systems
pays off.
This goes back for at least 75 years of behavioral sciences research. No matter what sort of reorganization or change, to the extent you can give people prediction, understanding, and control. And when you do something that harms them, treat them with a little human compassion. Don't treat them like they are a robot. And to me, that's basic change management. But it's amazing how rarely it seems to be remembered in the way people do things.
Yeah. And related to that, with this fear of people getting laid off, et cetera, is I think another thing that senior leaders can really do is make sure that you're giving people space to think about how they change their jobs and craft their jobs and make them different. AI is not the first tool that's threatened to get rid of jobs or de-skill jobs. And in fact, I was doing some reading recently of all these studies that were done in the 1960s and the early 70s when we first started to get, CNC tools in manufacturing and things like that. And there was all this discussion of jobs. And so they did these studies of automation. And what they found out was that in most companies, the jobs that got, eliminated, obviously were the most lower level jobs. However, there was usually room for those people to sort of move up to the next level and then to move up to the next level. And the companies that were most successful were the ones that figured out at the sort of middle level of management, right? Maybe they're just like a slightly above that, for them how to recreate their jobs. Because if you think about it, right, you're moving somebody up and they're sort of taking their boss's job and they're taking their boss's job, and you get to a ceiling where then it's not clear what this person does. Right. And so that's the point where we need to be more creative and empower organizations to be thinking about what are those new areas that we could be moving into? Where are the places where we can really create value? And I don't think we do that enough, is to give people that idea. I think
that's a great example. And if you think of organizations, you ask what organizations that are doing this well, both in terms of AI and also in terms of what Paul is talking about. Walmart, which is, I can't believe I'm saying this about Walmart, but they are one of the best managed companies I've ever seen. Especially one of the things they've done in the last 3 or 4 years, actually, the head of HR, Donna Morris, and her team, they've done a whole bunch of things to focus more on developing the people to go up to the next level. And also, they're one of the most disciplined organizations about weaving AI into the actual work that people are doing. And some of it starts with the notion that the senior leaders they start at the bottom at Walmart too, so they understand the path. And that whole sort of integrated job skill path and understanding the work itself, when you do that for people, you can put them through all sorts of changes because they trust you.
And that's one of the most optimistic promises, right? Is that everyone gets to ultimately level up and go places, an organization, expand, even sort of what the organization does. We've only got a few minutes left. That went by really quickly, but we started with, expectations at the beginning of this year. Look forward now. What do you think is going to be the biggest change next year? Do we actually get agents that work is what I'm curious about too. We talk about them all the time. But what specifically are they going to be able to do? And, again, Arvind, I'll ask you as well. Are we seeing sort of it supercharge that top line growth finally next year?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think first we should know that already, in the later half of 2025, we've seen significant increase in how businesses are actually able to deploy agents for various different business processes across all of these functions. We started talking about engineering and tech support, but now we're seeing actual agents being developed for HR teams, legal, finance, sales, customer success. In fact, nobody wants to be left behind. And I think and there is a shift. Last year people used to think that, okay, well, I got to try, I got to see whether it works. This year there's a belief that it actually works. And when fast forward to next year, there would be that basic expectation that there is a good chunk of work that you have moved from your teams, on a per department basis. 20% of your work is being done by AI agents. It's actually because best practices are emerging. For every specific team. Take legal for example. There are specific tasks that legal teams spend a lot of time on. For example, redlining contracts. By the end of next year, at every large enterprise, you'd expect AI to be the first, AI agent to be the first, step in that process of redlining business contracts. So similarly, filling RFPs, for sales teams, it will be odd for a company to sort of not be using AI to automate that process of responding to RFPs. So there are going to be, I think the shift will be that today, this year, it's seen as well. I got an agent to redline contracts. I got an agent to fill RFPs, and that's seen as win. And next year, that's going to be seen as a loss if you're not doing it. Okay. So I think that's what is going to become a lot more normal.
Right. Paul, what are we going to be talking about? The biggest change in enterprise AI a year from now?
Yeah, well, I think we'll be talking a lot about agents. Arvind knows much better than me about how agents will progress. But I'm optimistic, especially if we can figure out how we get agents as operators. I think one of the biggest frustrations that I see most folks have is that we're still in this mindset that most of our tools are deterministic, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why ChatGPT doesn't help us to do math problems very well, because it's doing a probabilistic answer rather than a deterministic answer. And there's so many things that we need to do where we just need to go out and search for something, or we need to do an equation rather than generate something that's brand new. And we need agents that help us to determine, given what we're asking, where do we go, and how do we get then a team, like a multi-agent team, right, to then have the right agents that are going out and doing the right things. So I'm excited about that. The other thing is prediction. So I think that our tools are getting much, much better about prediction. And you asked about exhaustion before. One of the chief drivers of our digital exhaustion these days is that it's hard for us to stay in a flow of work. We're constantly moving across multiple tools and looking for data and inputs. So the more that we can get tools that help not only integrate things for us and allow us to stay in our flow of work, but make predictions about what we need so that we get that stuff in the moment is really important. Just a really quick metaphor. So my youngest daughter plays flag football, and it's been fun to watch the team progress over the last couple of years. She's in 6th grade. And what I've noticed they just started to learn to do was, the quarterback would throw a pass, and then the girls would turn around and they'd run towards the ball, catch it, and then turn around and then run towards the end zone, right? What they're learning to do is for the quarterback to anticipate where is the girl going to be as she's running so that the pass gets delivered as she's making her way towards the end zone. That's what we need AI to help us to do, right? Is to move us more towards where are we going to be? And I think we're going to see tremendous strides towards that next year.
As a Canadian, I'll use the tired analogy, not where the puck is, but where the puck is going.
Exactly. You got it.
Bob, I don't want to shortchange you, but I do want to get a few audience questions in. Really quick prediction from you about what we'll be talking about next year.
I think most predictions are wrong, but
there we go.
But I would predict that the companies that are going to win, despite all the talk about agile teams, are the ones who have more standardization and a little bit more command and control, because we're at the point, there's been the messy 3 years, and even though those are supposed to be dirty words in management, actually sometimes it helps. And I think we're at the rhythm where those are the ones who are going to win, who are not the ones who let everybody do whatever they want.
All right, I like that. Great note to end on. I know we've only got a few minutes left. Maybe you guys will let me go a few extra if there's some more questions, but let's open it up. For a lot of great things. Just yell it out. I think you can, unless there's mics, but yeah, in the back here.
Yeah, I'm used to a rule-based system. I need to see that I can predict what the answer will come. How do you see this chasm being conquered, if at all?
Well, one thing that AI allows you to do is even those precise workflows that have to operate without that sort of judgment, like they have to fully deterministic. AI can actually still play a big role in that. Like it actually allows you to go and build those workflows automatically, but then execute them without sort of without like playing a role during the execution time. So I think depending on tasks, like AI doesn't necessarily preclude you from like still sort of building those great agents that are fully deterministic.
And I just add there too that I think understanding context is going to be increasingly important for making these kinds of decisions, right? So I don't think our users are very good at being able to articulate, like, I know that this is a deterministic question that I'm asking. So what we need to be able to do is make better inference based on queries so that we know how to route, sort of route it to the right agents in the right kind of ways. Exactly. And I think the more that we can understand the context behind these questions and the commands that we're giving, then the better we're going to be at doing that.
Any other questions? Yeah, please.
Yep.
There's a natural conflict here. How do we bridge that chasm?
So my first reaction is that I oversimplified the nature of excellent leadership, and this is in our AI report. What the best leaders know when to do is they know when to flatten the hierarchy, get out of the way, and let the front lines go, and then they know when to activate the hierarchy and step in. So I think they'll be doing a little bit more activating and a little less flattening. So that's kind of the best answer that I can give. But treating hierarchy as something that's absolutely fixed is actually a mistake that organizational theorists have made and they just now realized.
Yeah, so I would say I think both things can be true. If you think about it like the command and control part that Bob's talking about, I see in two ways. One is setting the strategic direction for our organization. And then that leaves room for people to experiment about how best to achieve that strategic direction. And then the second is more command and control around the tool use in our organization. So this is a question Bob and I have, we've talked about this a lot over the years, that there's such a proliferation of tools, right, that we use in our companies. And it's killing your employees. And so, when I talk to companies around, their Gen AI use in particular, they're like, well, I don't know, should I be using, we have subscription to Gemini, and we have another enterprise subscription to ChatGPT, we have another one to, Copilot. So like, should I be using this or should I be using that? They shouldn't be asking those questions. You should be like, here's the tool that we're using. We got one, learn how to use it, standardize it. And then in that, you've got the capabilities. Now go out and figure out what you can do.
Yeah, but everyone that's selling sort of software to companies wants you to use their own
of
thing.
course.
That's how you get 20 note takers in a Zoom meeting.
Of course. Well, and the other sneaky thing that that happens all the time, right, is I've got afraid of entrepreneurs that come into my classes to talk, and they always say, okay, well, here's the secret, kids. The pricing strategy is, of course, you make sure that the price or whatever it is, right, is that mid-level manager can charge on their credit card without getting IT approval, right? And so then you get 60 instances of Slack in your organization.
I see some heads that are shaking.
No, I was actually.
It's not just me, right? There's too many different agents fed to you as well. I mean, if agents is the hottest, buzziest thing right now and next year, like all three of you have predicted, how do you just standardize one agent when everyone's got one? Maybe Arvind can answer that because he's got the best one.
I think. Well, I mean, I think there will be multiple. Sort of general purpose assistants in the enterprise, like companies will have Gemini, they may also have Glean. Similarly, there will be many different agent platforms because they're good at certain things. There are agents that are easy. Some platforms make it really easy for them to build. Some of them are more feature rich, but requires developers who have to go and build them. So I think agents is a very broad term, and ultimately we're talking about that. Agents are going to replace all the work that happens today. So it's a pretty broad, sort of space, and there will be room for many different platforms. I think the key is to not sort of I think go and restrict your teams, because you also don't know which ones of these are going to actually innovate more in the future and are going to win. So you have to have some flexibility. You have to have multiple tools. But make sure that it's all done in a coordinated fashion. That, for example, AI has to be brought in with the right security, with the right governance. So centralize the functions that you need to centralize, but then let still be have some choice in terms of the actual end user experiences that you deliver.
So maybe agents talking to agents.
I mean, one other basic solution is to at least remember to go through and have periods of subtraction.
Right. Yeah.
Because organizations and humans, we just add more and more stuff, and just having the discipline. If you're going to try a bunch of things, at least go through and clean house every now and then.
Right.
And Deirdre, you said agents talking to agents. I just want one quick thing there. Arvind mentioned the RFP. Yeah. I think the bigger question that we should all be asking in this room is that if you have an agent that helps create an RFP, and then you have an agent that reads an RFP, do we need an RFP at all? Right? I think it's a legitimate question, right? Which is, are there other ways of soliciting a contract that might be more efficient?
Paul, now you're opening up a whole can of worms on who exists a year from now or a decade from now. Do we need software companies? And we're at the end of our time. So
good. Isn't that our job?
I think a lot of questions were brought up. You can't do justice to this topic with three great minds here in 45 minutes. But I hope that everyone learned a lot. I certainly did. That's why I love doing these things. Thank you, gentlemen, so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.